Hi everyone. Welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. We're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Ryan Poston was born to Lisa and Jay Poston on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. Throughout his life, Ryan enjoyed a strong and loving relationship with his three sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Growing up, Ryan had the privilege of traveling the world and attending schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. In addition to his adventurous spirit, Ryan was known for his exceptional looks. His captivating features and charismatic personality made him a standout among his peers. After graduating high school, Ryan continued his educational journey at Indiana University, where he majored in political science, history, and geography. He excelled in his studies and graduated with honors in 2005. Driven to follow in his family's footsteps, Ryan pursued a career in law and enrolled in Sam and Pete Chase College of Law in Northern Kentucky University. With a deep admiration for the legal profession, Ryan followed in the footsteps of his esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys. Ryan Poston was a young man with big aspirations. One of his biggest dreams was to own a successful law firm. However, in the meantime, he worked in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he dedicated his time and energy to representing individuals who could not afford to hire more expensive attorneys. Despite his young age, Ryan had already gained a significant following. Many people sought his counsel and guidance. He worked tirelessly to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of financial circumstances. In 2011, after a heart-wrenching breakup, Ryan sought solace and support from his Carissa. During this period, he frequently traveled to Lexington, Kentucky, to spend time with her. During one of those trips, his life took an unexpected turn. While in Lexington, Ryan met Shauna Hubers. Originally from Lexington, Kentucky, Shauna Hubers was the epitome of a true Southern girl, known for her outgoing personality and ability to make friends effortlessly. She possessed a contagious warmth and charm that drew people towards her. After graduating from high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she pursued her higher education at the University of Kentucky, where she majored in psychology. Then, she moved on to Eastern Kentucky University, where she pursued her master's degree in psychology. Despite their age difference, Ryan was 29 and Shauna was just 21. Their feelings for each other were undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself spending more and more time with Shauna. The more time they spent together, the deeper their bond grew. Shauna found herself spending more and more time in Highland Heights, the suburb in Kentucky where Ryan resided. Each weekend, Shauna packed a bag and made the journey to Ryan's home. There, she devoted herself to taking care of him, cooking for him, and cleaning his space. As time passed, their relationship progressed and Ryan took Shauna to meet his parents. To her friends, Shauna couldn't contain her excitement. She gushed about Ryan, declaring her desire to be Mrs. Ryan Poston. However, Ryan and Shauna's bright future fell apart on October 12, 2012. Shauna told the dispatcher that she had just killed her boyfriend, Ryan. The details she shared painted a tragic picture of a domestic violence incident that had spiraled out of control. Shauna claimed that Ryan had attempted to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she tried to retrieve her belongings. Shauna informed the 911 dispatcher that her boyfriend, Ryan, confronted her with a gun, and a physical altercation ensued. During the altercation, Shauna managed to gain possession of the firearm. However, she was intimidated by Ryan's size, and out of panic, Shauna pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. According to Shauna, she knew that Ryan was going to die anyway, so she wanted to put him out of his misery. Shauna explained to the 911 dispatcher because Ryan seemed to be suffering and making funny noises, she shot him several more times. She further divulged to the dispatcher that she placed the gun on a bookshelf after the incident. Minutes after Shauna called 911 and reported that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, the officers instructed Shauna to exit the apartment with her hands raised. Despite her initial hesitation, Shauna complied with the officers' orders. As she walked out of the apartment, the officers instructed her to lie face down on the ground. While Shauna followed the officers' instructions, it was evident that she was very upset. After the officers handcuffed Shauna and placed her in the back of their patrol vehicle, they made entry into the apartment and discovered Ryan Poston dead on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived at the apartment and observed Ryan's condo, which appeared slightly messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. It was discovered that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons. The gun Shauna used to shoot Ryan was his Sig Sauer semi-automatic. Based on the evidence gathered at the apartment, the investigators determined that Ryan was seated at the table when Shauna opened fire. They knew this due to the presence of blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were undisturbed raised doubts regarding Shauna's version of events. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators meticulously combed through Ryan's apartment. Simultaneously, officers canvassed the apartment complex, hoping to gather additional information from Ryan's neighbors. One neighbor, a woman named Nikki, offered valuable information to the detective. Nikki stated that she knew Shauna quite well and believed that Shauna's dedication to Ryan was not reciprocated. According to Nikki, the couple frequently engaged in heated arguments, often disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. Several months ago, Nikki recalled an incident where Shauna appeared at her door in tears, expressing her fear of Ryan. Shauna had informed Nikki that her altercation with Ryan had turned violent, claiming that he had picked her up and thrown her down the hallway, resulting in injuries. Nikki believed Shauna's account, stating that she encouraged Shauna to report the abuse to the police. However, Shauna opted not to pursue legal action. At the police station, detectives brought Shauna into an interrogation room to interview her regarding her involvement in shooting her boyfriend, Ryan. Before proceeding with the questioning, the officers read Shauna her Miranda rights, informing her of her right to an attorney. Shauna exercised this right and requested the presence of an attorney. As she waited in the interrogation room, she filled out paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite the request for an attorney, Shauna chose to engage in conversation with the detective. When asked for the name of her victim, Shauna replied, "The man I killed." This response displayed a certain coldness and detachment, as it was clear that she knew the identity of her victim, which was Ryan, her longtime boyfriend. Shauna continued to talk to the detectives in the interrogation room. She expressed her belief that she had acted in self-defense, stating that Ryan had grabbed her by the throat and thrown her around the apartment like a rag doll. She described the entire night as a surreal and out-of-body experience. At a certain point in the investigation, the detectives stepped out of the interrogation room while another officer took their place. Shauna began sharing new details with this officer regarding her encounter with Ryan. She claimed that prior to shooting him, he had said mean and nasty things to Shauna, calling her crazy and taunting her while holding a gun. According to Shauna, Ryan's behavior that night was extremely violent, which she believed was a result of him being under the influence of drugs. Throughout the interview, Shauna maintained her account of the events that led to the shooting and stated that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table playing with ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol. Shauna noticed him glaring at her from across the table. At that moment, according to Shauna, she realized his intentions and knew he was kicking her out of his condo. She admitted to picking up the gun and shooting Ryan. Amidst the chaos, Shauna fired one shot, striking Ryan. Shauna's account of the incident continued, alleging that after shooting Ryan once, she noticed him twitching. Believing that it was necessary to put him out of his misery, she fired several more times, ultimately killing him. During her confession, Shauna revealed to the detective that Ryan was vain. He claimed he expressed a desire for a nose job, so she took it upon herself to grant him that wish. Shauna intentionally aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, resulting in him receiving the rhinoplasty he had requested. During the dramatic interrogation, Shauna expressed deep concerns about her schoolwork and the damage a dead boyfriend would do to her love life. She confided that no one would want to marry her when they discovered she had murdered her boyfriend in self-defense. The detective, having listened to her statement, eventually arrested her and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shauna seemed genuinely shocked that she had been taken into custody, as she was adamant that she had shot him in self-defense. In 2015, Shauna's trial began, and the courtroom was shrouded in anticipation. The prosecutor presented their opening argument, comparing Shauna to the infamous Jodi Arias. Jodi Arias, like Shauna, had been charged with murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, and the two cases were eerily similar. This comparison only heightened the tension in the courtroom, as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor contended that Shauna was obsessed with Ryan, her ex-boyfriend. According to the prosecution, Ryan consumed Shauna's thoughts. All she ever talked about was him. During the trial, the prosecutor said Ryan's friends painted a picture of his intentions. They claimed that Ryan was planning to end his relationship with Shauna and was actively avoiding her phone calls and text messages. Despite this, Shauna would still show up at his condo in Highland Heights uninvited. On the night of the murder, the state presented evidence to the jury that Ryan had a date lined up with Audrey Bolt, Miss Ohio, in 2012. This information added fuel to the prosecution's theory that Shauna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she and Ryan were supposed to meet for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder. She arrived at the bar and patiently waited for Ryan, but he never came. It was not until later that she learned that he had been shot and killed. During Shauna's trial, the prosecution presented evidence to the jury that showed that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Shauna. A few days before his death, Ryan called his father, Jay, seeking advice on how to handle the situation. Jay testified that he had told Ryan to be nice to Shauna in order to avoid an ugly breakup. However, despite these attempts to defuse the situation, it appears that Shauna continued to manipulate Ryan. On the day that Ryan was killed, the prosecution presented evidence showing that he spent a significant amount of time exchanging texts with Shauna. In these texts, Ryan explicitly informed her that he did not want to see her that weekend as he had other things to do. Despite this, Shauna showed up at his condo uninvited, as she often did. According to the prosecution, at some point during the argument, Ryan firmly stated that it was over and that Shauna could no longer manipulate him. The prosecutor said this seemed to infuriate Shauna, who, out of rage, picked up the gun and fatally shot Ryan. During Shauna's murder trial, the prosecution played the interrogation video in order to present evidence to the jury suggesting that she was a cold-blooded murderer. In the video, Shauna's demeanor and responses appeared to support the theory that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed Shauna dancing around the room and singing along to music, seemingly disregarding the gravity of the situation. This behavior seemed unusual for someone who had just killed the person they loved in self-defense. Most people in a similar situation would likely be in tears, devastated by the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's strategy in playing the interrogation video was to portray Shauna as detached and unemotional, suggesting that her actions were not those of someone who had killed in self-defense. They argued that her lack of tears and her carefree behavior were indicative of her guilty conscience. However, it is important to note that this interpretation was subjective and open to interpretation by the jury. Ultimately, the interrogation video played a crucial role in the prosecution's case against Shauna. Still, it was only one piece of evidence to consider alongside other evidence presented during the trial. Shauna's defense attorneys maintained a consistent narrative throughout her trial, asserting that Ryan was the one who acted erratically and violently on the night of the incident, which ultimately led to her shooting him. To support this claim, the defense painted a state of mind, alleging that a combination of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety meds and amphetamines, played a significant role in his behavior. To strengthen their argument, Shauna's attorneys presented the jury with autopsy results that revealed the presence of the aforementioned drugs in Ryan's system. This evidence served to reinforce the notion that his actions were influenced by the substances he was under the influence of. Shauna's attorneys called an expert toxicologist to testify on her behalf. This witness stated that a combination of drugs, like anti-anxiety meds and amphetamines, could potentially cause someone to be violent and paranoid. By presenting this expert testimony, the defense aimed to establish a plausible justification for Shauna's actions, casting doubt on deliberate intent. During Shauna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution became increasingly concerned about her chances of acquittal. As a smart, young, pretty woman, they worried her self-defense claim might sway the jury. However, their fears were put to rest on April 23, when the jury returned with a guilty verdict, convicting Shauna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shauna continued to blame Ryan for his death, which angered his friends and family. Despite the evidence presented during the trial, Shauna maintained her innocence and refused to accept responsibility for her actions. In Kentucky, if the judge determines that a defendant was a victim of domestic violence, they may be eligible for reduced parole after serving only 20% of their sentence. However, the judge in this case did not believe that Shauna was entitled to the reduced parole, saying that she had committed a cold-blooded murder. The judge sentenced Shauna to 40 years in prison, meaning that she will be eligible for parole in 17 years when she is 41 years old in 2032. After Shauna Hubers was sentenced, she appealed for a new trial, which a judge granted in August 2016. The basis for granting the appeal was that one of the jurors had concealed their felony conviction, which violated Kentucky law. Felons are prohibited from serving on juries. In August 2018, after a lengthy delay of 4 months, Shauna's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston commenced. Opening arguments were presented by Shauna's defense attorney, who stated that in the year and a half that she dated Ryan, she made every effort to please him. However, their romantic relationship suffered as a result. According to the defense attorney, on the first night that Shauna and Ryan met, he was both sexually and physically violent toward her. This incident had a lasting impact on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages afterward. Shauna's defense attorneys further claimed that when she was in high school, she had been sexually assaulted, leading to a long history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. It was argued that this traumatic experience had contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team's strategy was to present a sympathetic portrayal of Shauna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They aimed to challenge the prosecution's narrative and convince the jury that her behavior was driven by a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. Shauna's defense team sought to portray her as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They argued that Shauna's actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but rather as a result of years of abuse at the hands of her former partner. One of the key arguments put forth by Shauna's defense attorney was that Ryan had badgered her about her weight and chest size, constantly making negative comments and pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant criticism and pressure, the defense claimed, contributed to Shauna's low self-esteem and contributed to her feelings of inadequacy. The defense also alleged that Ryan and Shauna's sexual relationship had been strained, with frequent arguments and frustration on both sides. It was contended that Ryan's desire for a more romantic and intimate connection was not fulfilled, leading to the growing distance between them. To support their claim, the defense presented evidence that Shauna had received a shot to boost her romantic life. This injection, they said, was sought as a means to address the couple's sexual difficulties and improve their relationship. However, the defense argued that Ryan's constant rejection and disinterest further exacerbated the strain on their relationship, leading Shauna to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Ryan would frequently break it off with Shauna and then engage in conversations with other women. During their opening statement, the prosecution informed the jury that they were not aiming to portray Ryan Poston as the perfect boyfriend. However, they maintained that he was not an abusive individual. They argued that Shauna did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan. Instead, they alleged that Shauna shot Ryan because he had ended their relationship. On the night of the shooting, the prosecution stated that it was finally time for Ryan to break up with Shauna as she refused to leave him alone. Despite the breakup, Shauna always returned, even after Ryan had ended things with her. According to the prosecution, This behavior was evidence of Shauna's inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's work friends testified in court that the breakup between him and Shauna this time would be permanent because Ryan had never broken up with Shauna face-to-face before. He claimed that Shauna had been relentless in her efforts to keep him. During the trial, the prosecution presented text messages from Shauna to her friends in which the woman expressed that the romantic acts she and Ryan had engaged in had brought them closer together. However, Shauna, who testified in her own defense at her second trial, refuted this claim, stating that it had actually driven them apart. In another exchange of text messages, Shauna requested intercourse, but Ryan was taking antidepressants and was not physically driven due to the side effects of the medication. However, when Shauna took the stand, she alleged that Ryan had forced her to engage in sexual intercourse. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury once again convicted Shauna of murdering Ryan. Despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence, the jury reached their decision, upholding their initial verdict. During the sentencing hearing, Shauna's mother addressed the judge, sharing an emotional story about her daughter's singing talent and its role in securing multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she pleaded for the jury to consider granting parole to Shauna, asserting that she still had the opportunity to impact people's lives positively. However, she made it clear that her pleas did not diminish the grief and pain being experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Ultimately, Shauna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to sentencing terms, Shauna will be required to serve at least 17 years before she can be considered for parole in 2032. She is serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Story 2. Maria Munoz, a young woman full of life, met a tragic end on September 22, 2020 that shocked her loved ones. The community was puzzled about who could have done such a terrible thing, until they were shocked to discover that Maria's own husband was the unexpected suspect. As the details emerged, a web of secrets and deception was revealed, leaving everyone close to Maria shocked and saddened. In the bustling state of Texas, a shocking event unfolded that left everyone shocked. Maria Munoz, a young and lively woman full of dreams, met a tragic end that deeply affected her family and friends. The events leading to her unexpected death on September 22, 2020 left many stunned, especially when suspicions turned toward her own husband as the possible culprit. The story took a dark turn when toxicology reports found 7 different drugs in her system. Also, it's hard to believe Maria's journal was also the key evidence that helped catch the killer. It's crazy to think that something Maria wrote down played such a big part in solving the case. As the investigation progressed, secrets began to surface, revealing a side of the story that nobody saw coming. Maria Munoz, born on January 25, 1989, was one of 3 children to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz. Growing up in a vibrant and loving household in Puerto Rico, she faced early loss when her mother passed away. Also around that time, she met Joel Pellet. Despite this hardship, Maria took on the role of caregiver for her siblings, Marisol Munoz and Peter Hernandez. Maria and Pellet first met in Puerto Rico, Maria's home country. At that time, Pellet was a nursing student with big dreams, and Maria was also a nurse. Pellet was 11 years older than Maria, but despite the age gap of 11 years, they both tied the knot in 2011. Later, they moved to Laredo, Texas, where Pellet secured a prestigious position as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital, bringing in a substantial income. Their newfound financial stability afforded them a life of extravagance, filled with luxury cars and extravagant vacations. Maria Munoz, age 31, lived in Laredo, Texas, as a full-time mother caring for her 2 young sons and her husband, Joel Pellet, aged 42. She left her job just to take good care of her children. Maria, a loving stay-at-home mom, cherished her 2 young boys. Every day, she would take them to the park to play and read to them before bedtime, showing her dedication as a mother. While she enjoyed being at home with her children, she also found joy in playing the piano as a hobby. Despite her happiness as a stay-at-home mom, she always held on to her dream of returning to school and becoming a nurse again. For a long time, everything appeared to be going smoothly in their relationship. Pellet would often share pictures of his wife and children, proudly talking about how wonderful they were to his friends and colleagues. However, behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. In the year 2018, shortly after Maria welcomed their second son, those close to Pellet began to observe a shift in his behavior. He underwent a noticeable transformation, losing weight and gaining muscle. He also became increasingly sociable with other women, displaying flirtatious behavior that did not align with the conduct expected of a married man. He began removing photos that featured his wife and children, instead opting to post pictures of himself alone. This change in his online activity gave the impression that he was living a single life, without the responsibilities and commitments of a married man with a family. That same year, the colleagues observed Pellet becoming increasingly friendly with a surgical nurse named Janet Arredondo. Over time, it became clear that they both had started a secret relationship, carrying on an affair behind Maria's back. But in early 2020, Maria's worst fears came true. She found airline tickets that Pellet had bought for himself and Janet to travel to Europe. This discovery left Maria heartbroken and depressed. She had trusted him and thought their marriage was strong. But then she felt betrayed. Maria was devastated to learn that life they had built together for 10 years was a lie. She didn't know how to move forward, feeling lost and alone. In the midst of her emotional breakdown, she sought help from a therapist to cope with the devastating truth about her marriage. The therapist prescribed medication to support Maria through her mental health struggles. Around this time, Maria turned to writing journals as a way to process her thoughts and emotions. Soon, things were getting worse between Pellet and Maria. So, on September 19, 2020, Maria went to Janet's house and saw Pellet's car parked in the driveway. She confronted them at the house, and when he came out, Maria made him choose between her and Janet. In answer, he said he'll choose Janet. During the argument, Janet called the police, but Maria and Pellet had left by the time they arrived. The police called Maria while she was driving with Pellet, and they heard him yelling at her in the background. When they got home, he became so angry that he punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, which was an alarming display of force and anger. The following morning, on Sunday, September 20th, Maria sent Pellet a text message expressing her intention to hire a lawyer to help sort out their situation. However, he replied, suggesting that they handle things without involving lawyers, as he believed it would be too costly. Just a few hours after their text exchange, it seemed that he had a change of heart. He sent Maria an email expressing his deep sadness and inner turmoil. In the email, he conveyed his desire to sit down with Maria for an honest and non-argumentative conversation. This is what he said: "I am so sad I am hurting inside. I want to sit down with you to talk without arguing. A heart-to-heart." Maria replied to his email, and they both agreed to meet at approximately 5 p.m. the next night on Monday, September 21st. Before going to meet him, she was so nervous and then messaged her friend Yasmin Martinez that today they were going to meet. This is what she said: "I just ask if you can pray for me." But sadly, her prayers were not answered, and the meeting ended in a horrifying way. On September 22nd, 2020, Pellet dialed 911 in a panic, mentioning that his wife might have taken some prescription pills and was not breathing. Officer Dyla Cruz was the first who came to Pellet's house at around 1:40 a.m., and his body cam was also recording every detail. The officer found Pellet at the top of the stairs near the main bedroom. He was still wearing his green hospital scrubs and was doing CPR on his wife. Their 2 sons were sleeping in the rooms close by. As soon as the paramedics got there, they took over doing CPR on Maria. While first responders were working diligently to save Maria's life, another officer approached Pellet to inquire about the pills she had reportedly taken. Without hesitation, Pellet went to a nearby bathroom, searched through the medicine cabinet, and retrieved a bottle. He handed it to the officers, who later discovered it contained a prescription for clonazepam, a benzodiazepine medication used to manage acute anxiety, panic attacks, and sometimes epilepsy. Benzodiazepines, like clonazepam, work by slowing down the nervous system to induce a calming effect. Upon examining the bottle, the officer noticed that the pills were actually prescribed to Pellet, not Maria. Another detail that caught the officer's attention was that the pill bottle had been returned to the medicine cabinet. Typically, in cases of overdose, the pill bottle is found near the person. Afterward, Pellet was captured on body camera picking up the pill container from the floor and placing it in his pocket. De La Cruz questioned himself as to why he would retrieve the pills. Could he be concealing something? Another reason to suspect Pellet with De La Cruz also came across a needle catheter on the stairs in the couple's home. This seemed odd to him. Pellet and Maria had 2 young children, so finding a needle on the stairs raised questions about why it was there. This is not all. Investigators also uncovered more than just a needle. They also discovered syringes and 4 equipment neatly packed in a medical bag. While this finding may seem ordinary given Pellet's profession as an anesthesia nurse, the presence of these medical tools outside a clinical setting raised intriguing questions for the investigators. Despite this unusual circumstance, Pellet informed the officers that Maria had been struggling with deep depression recently. He explained that her mental health had been deteriorating, leading her to take the pills in an attempt to cope with her overwhelming emotions. So, despite first responders' best efforts, Maria couldn't be revived. It's hard to believe, but by 3:58 a.m. that day, she was pronounced dead. After Maria was declared dead, officers took Pellet downstairs to the kitchen for additional questioning. He then explained to the officers that on that day, he and Maria had met for a conversation. After their discussion, they both got intimate and then he took a shower. Upon exiting the shower, he found Maria asleep. He went downstairs for a while, though the reason for this was not clarified. When he returned upstairs and approached Maria, he discovered she was unresponsive and not breathing. While talking, the officer noticed Pellet's strange behavior. He was sweating very badly and was literally unable to answer simple questions about the incident. The officer also observed that Pellet's level of sweating was noticeably higher than anyone else present, even the first responder who had been trying to save Maria's life for the past 2 hours. This made officers more suspicious of him. For further questioning, he was then taken by Sergeant Luis Mata to the police station. At the police station, Pellet was left alone in the interrogation room for a while before an officer came in. His every action was getting recorded on video. When officers watched the footage, they were shocked to see how Pellet suddenly went crazy. He started screaming, crying, hitting the walls, and throwing furniture around the room. He was being so loud and out of control that people in the hallway and other rooms nearby got scared hearing all the voices coming from his room. So, at 4 a.m., an officer, Sergeant Luis Mata, entered the room to talk to Pellet. During this conversation, he opened up once again about the events leading up to Maria's death. Shockingly, he also confessed to the officer that he had been involved with another woman named Janet. He revealed that he had actually left the family home 5 months earlier and was living with her at the time of Maria's death. He shared that he had been in a relationship with Janet for 2 years by then, and Maria had been aware of the affair for a while. According to him, on the night of Maria's passing, he visited the family home to have a conversation with her about their marriage. After their discussion, they got intimate. He said he thought Maria was asleep in her room, but only 10 minutes later when he returned to check on her, but tragically found her unresponsive. He later confessed to the officer that he gave Maria the medication prescribed to him, clonazepam, to help ease her anxiety and depression. However, he couldn't provide details to the officer about how much she had taken or how many pills were left in the bottle before she accessed them. Unfortunately, he was unable to provide any additional information to help clarify the situation. After all the questioning, he was released. So, the next step was to do Maria's autopsy. The autopsy took place just 8 hours after her death, which was relatively soon after she passed away. This timing meant that whatever caused her death should still be detectable in her stomach contents. As the investigation into Maria's death intensified, the autopsy results delivered a shocking revelation. Contrary to initial suspicions, no traces of pills were discovered in her stomach. However, the medical examiner's report uncovered a shocking clue: a small, red mark on the inside of her elbow. What was more shocking was that it was a pinprick mark. The small red mark on her arm was concerning because it suggested she may have been injected with something. This unexpected discovery led investigators to explore the significance of this mark and its potential connection to her death. Soon, the investigators discovered another thing from Maria's house. So what was that? A journal was found at Maria's place. As it was mentioned earlier, to cope with the anxiety and depression, she started writing a journal. And that journal helped investigators a lot to know who the culprit was. So what they found in that journal was really heart-wrenching. In that journal, she wrote her thoughts and experiences. Through her writings, the investigators discovered that Maria loved her husband and wanted to preserve their family, even though she recognized his wish to be with someone else. She wrote, "I want it to stop. My past haunts me and I don't want to be sad anymore." In her journal entries, Maria detailed her heartbreak when Pellet left their Laredo home, leaving her to care for their 2 young sons. Her diary and recordings on her cell phone helped investigators uncover her husband's abusive behavior, documenting her emotional journey from grief to healing and a newfound optimism for the future. She also wrote in the journal, "My heart says one thing, my mind says something else. I am in this constant battle, tug of war. I want it to stop, but they won't. They keep me sad. And those are my tears. My future is foggy and unclear. My past haunts me, and my present is confusing. Lord, hear me cry. See my tears. Feel my pain. Bring me laughter. Bring me peace. Bring me happiness again. I don't want to be sad anymore. I don't want my heart to hurt. I don't want my mind to be in torture, please. I beg you, O Lord." The day before her untimely death, Maria Munoz wrote the following in her journal. "What is it that I want? Number 1, move forward." The entries in Maria's journal the day before her death showed her desire to live and move forward with her life. There was no mention of suicide or any plans to end her life. So after going through her journal, the investigators didn't think she had committed suicide. They needed more information to understand what really happened. So this was what happened next. Pellet's previous employer, Dr. John Hunsinger, who was an anesthesiologist, became aware of the autopsy findings. He contacted the lead detective, De La Cruz, who was working on the case and expressed his concerns. Dr. Hunsinger recommended that the investigators should conduct a comprehensive toxicology screening. So they did that. In January 2021, investigator Sergeant Luis Mata and De La Cruz received the long-awaited toxicology test results. Contrary to Pellet's claim of clonazepam, Maria did not have that drug in her system. However, the toxicology report revealed a shocking truth: the presence of 7 other drugs: morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, ketamine, lidocaine, and Narcan. These medications are commonly used in surgical procedures. Propofol and ketamine are used as sedatives and for pain management, often administered intravenously during surgical procedures. Most people cannot access these drugs easily, and even many nurses and other medical professionals may never come into contact with medications like propofol and ketamine unless they work directly in anesthesiology. The presence of propofol in Maria's body was the most shocking finding for the investigators. The investigators thought that Pellet is a nurse anesthetist, so he would have access to propofol based on his profession. When Dr. Hunsinger, who worked with Pellet and had experience using propofol, saw the amount found in Maria's system, he said it was the highest quantity he had ever encountered. Based on this, the doctors strongly believed that propofol was the specific cause of Maria's death, as Pellet would know the appropriate dosage to sedate someone or cause an overdose. Additionally, a small mark on Maria's arm indicated that she may have been injected with the substance. Investigators believed that, with the toxicological report, Pellet's suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal, they had enough evidence to arrest Pellet for the murder of his wife, so authorities soon got an arrest warrant against Pellet. De La Cruz wasted no time and went to arrest Pellet. Surprisingly, he did not resist arrest, almost as if he had anticipated and accepted his impending fate. Soon he was taken to the police station, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the investigation, as law enforcement officials prepared to question him again about the events surrounding Maria Munoz's tragic death. He had to face the consequences of his heinous act. So the trial started on March 21, 2023. As the legal proceedings unfolded, both the prosecution and defense presented their cases. A prosecution team composed entirely of women, known as Maria's team, utilized Maria Munoz's journal entries to construct a compelling case against Pellet. This was done to illustrate to the jury the type of wife and mother Maria was. The prosecutors described Maria as an excellent mother who was caring and intelligent. They expressed feeling her vibrant spirit through the pages of her journal. During that trial, the prosecutors also suspected that Pellet first drugged Maria by putting some substances in her drink to make her sleepy. Once she was unconscious, he injected propofol into her arm. Prosecutors also believed that Pellet waited a long time before calling 911 so that the first responders would not be able to revive her when they arrived. The prosecutors stated that the journals helped them comprehend the challenges Maria faced, which in turn fueled their determination to seek justice in her case. During the final arguments, Pellet's lawyer, Roberto Bali, informed the jurors that his client wanted to work things out with his wife, Maria Munoz, before her passing. Bali reminded the jury about the medical examiner's report, which said Maria's cause of death was still unclear. He told them there was not enough proof to show Pellet was responsible for her death. Bali pointed out that Pellet had given Maria a drug called Narcan on the night she died, which is used to reverse overdoses. He even said both Pellet and Munoz struggled with drug addiction. Bali also argued that Maria Munoz willingly consumed the drugs without coercion, as there were no signs of force on her body. However, after investigating Maria's social circles, friends, and family, it became clear that she was not a drug addict, and Pellet was the only person who could have provided her with that substantial quantity of propofol. Authorities were also able to convince Pellet's girlfriend, surgical nurse Janet Arredondo, to testify against him. She revealed that he had admitted to her that he gave Maria something to calm her down, and confirmed that he had brought drugs, including propofol, home from work. The jury took less than 1 hour to reach the verdict. At last, after a 9-day trial on March 30th, 2023, a jury reached a verdict, finding Pellet guilty of the murder of his wife, Maria. On April 27th, 2023, Pellet received a life sentence for the murder conviction, plus an additional 10 years and a $10,000 fine for tampering with evidence. So where is Pellet now? Joel Pellet is currently serving a life sentence at a Texas Department of Criminal Justice, facing the consequences of his heinous actions. His imprisonment stands as a symbol of accountability and a solemn tribute to Maria's life, ensuring that her memory is honored through the pursuit of truth and the upholding of justice. The motive behind the killing is unclear, but according to the prosecution, Joel Pellet's motive for killing his wife, Maria Munoz, was rooted in his desire to end his marriage and be with his girlfriend, Janet Arredondo. Ultimately, justice had to be served, and the verdict ensured that Pellet was held accountable for his actions. The jury's decision brings some measure of closure to this tragic case, affirming that such heinous acts will not go unpunished. The conviction underscores the importance of upholding justice and sends a clear message that those who commit such crimes will face the full extent of the law. Story 3. On the night of June 23, 1993, the officers closest to a crime scene had to undertake the unsanitary task of digging through trash. They had a penis to find, and it belonged to John Bobbitt. Lorena, his wife, had sliced it off while he was sleeping. It's been 31 years. John and Lorena are alive and well, and their story remains unforgettable. John and Lorena Bobbitt were a former American couple whose story kept the world shocked and amazed at the audacity of humans when pushed to the extreme. John Wayne Bobbitt married Lorena Gallo on June 18, 1989. John was born in New York and raised in Niagara Falls. Unfortunately, his father was out of the picture and he was taken away from his mother, who was a drug addict at the tender age of 3. He had 2 brothers, and with them he went to live with his aunt and uncle. John stated that he grew up in a large family and his aunt and uncle raised them to be religious. The family went to church every Sunday and John joined the party gladly. When John came of age, he enlisted in the Marines since many of his friends were doing the same. For John, there was no sense in being alone while all his friends were gone. So he found himself a new family, the U.S. Marines. On the other hand, Lorena was born in Ecuador in 1969 but raised in Venezuela. Undoubtedly, she started migrating early in life. As Lorena recounted in her Amazon documentary, She had watched a lot of American television as a child, and it sold her the American dream. Her dreams came true when she migrated to America on a student visa. Lorena enrolled and studied at Northern Virginia Community College. John met Lorena at a Marine Corps officers' ball in 1988 while still serving in the Marine Corps. It does not matter if you have banished love at first sight into the pages of cheesy romance books. It happened for John and Lorena. They were attracted to each other and the chemistry was sublime. John described her as shy and didn't speak much English, but the chemistry was enough to start something. So that was what they did. They started dating each other. In 9 months, they were married. John Bobbitt married Lorena on June 18, 1989. According to an interview with 2020, the couple had different versions of how they got engaged. John claimed Lorena proposed to him in the presence of her mother. Lorena claimed the reverse was the case. Their wedding was a small one and officiated by a justice of peace. John adds that love or silly affection for one another had not rushed their wedding. They married quickly because Lorena's student visa would soon expire and she wanted to remain in America. It was her lifelong dream to live in America anyway, and who was John to deny her of such? This was one of the varying instances of their stories. According to Lorena, the abuse started right away after they got married. John has a contrary story. In his account, he did not harm, rape, or forcefully lay his hands on Lorena. He stuck to his story every time he was asked, and it was hard to pinpoint what was going on with the couple. John added that sometimes, when she started fighting him, he restrained her. He maintained his innocence and absolved himself of the assault claim made by Lorena with his testimony. Contrary to John's story, Lorena shared a version of her husband's assault. 1 month after their wedding, the couple were in a car when John started driving recklessly. Lorena was afraid for her life. Who wouldn't be? In her fear, she asked him to stop, placing her hands on the steering wheel. She intervened in a bid to straighten their route. It was at that moment that John, according to allegations levied against him, punched her for the first time. On June 22, 1993, John had suggested a divorce to Lorena, which upset her. Since she was still scared of him, she went to the police for help. The trip was in hopes of getting a protective order against John. The process took about 3 hours, but Lorena did not want to wait that long, so she left before she completed it. In the early hours of that evening, John went out drinking with his friend who had come to stay with him. When he returned home, he raped Lorena before he fell asleep. When he awoke, John said he had no memory or recall of what had transpired. He did not remember sex taking place between Lorena and himself, and the closest thing to a physical contact he vaguely remembered was petting, and that was it. On June 23, 1993, Lorena came home from work like any other day. John came home that night and raped her. It seemed the act was more customary than it was a one-time event. Afterwards, Lorena walked into the kitchen for a cup of water. There among the kitchen utensils was the knife that could give her breathing space from the instrument of torture her husband used to inflict pain on her. Lorena grabbed an 8-inch Jinsu carving knife she saw on the kitchen counter and walked into the bedroom with it. Lorena pulled back the sheets and severed John's member. Shortly after, Lorena left the apartment, got into a car, and drove away with the severed appendage in one of her hands. As she drove on, navigating the road with one hand on the wheel became too much work as the other hand held a severed member. She soon threw the shaft out of a window into a roadside field on Maplewood Drive. She drove around, not knowing what to do or whom to call. Eventually, she stopped and dialed 911, reporting what had happened and giving directions to where they could find her husband's missing appendage. The officers got there and got to work. After an exhaustive search, they did find John's missing appendage, washed it with antiseptic, and kept it in an icebox. Afterwards, paramedics drove him to a hospital. The surgeons reattached it in a surgical operation that took almost 10 hours. The incident happened in the early hours of 1993, around 4 a.m. By nightfall, Lorena had been arrested by the police and charged with the crime of malicious wounding. She risked spending up to 20 years in prison if found guilty. When Lorena Bobbitt was arrested, she reportedly told the police, "He always has an orgasm. and he doesn't wait for me ever to have an orgasm. He's selfish. The conversation ensued with Detective Peter Wentz and was recorded on a tape recorder. Mary Grace O'Brien, the Assistant Commonwealth Attorney of Prince William County, who was prosecuting Lorena, read the recording transcript that was read at trial. Many things about the couple's relationship came to limelight during the trial. Their home was somewhat volatile and had not been a happy place for Lorena. The Bobbitts revealed details of the event that led to the eventual act. Lorena accused John of abusing her sexually, physically, and emotionally. In addition to that, he flaunted his infidelity in her face and even forced her to abort a pregnancy. An expert witness had testified that John's threat imprisoned Lorena. "I will find you whether we are divorced or separated. Wherever I find you, I will have sex with you whenever I want to." The defense lawyer, Blair D. Howard, maintained that Lorena had acted in self-defense, coupled with temporary insanity. He stated that it was John's behavior and constant harassment that led to Lorena's snapping. She had been suffering from clinical depression. In addition to a truckload of post-traumatic stress disorder in the mix, one would likely have a mentally unstable person in their hands. The defense argued that John's perpetual abuse of his wife had caused everything. John denied all the allegations of abuse and harassment, but when Howard, the defense lawyer, cross-examined him, he found it hard to be consistent, conflicting his statement with known facts. In the course of the questioning, he weakened the prosecutor's case. In Lorena's testimony, there had been other rapes and physical battering on many occasions before the evening of the incident. She revealed that their finances were unstable, and John had not only stolen her earnings, but also spent the proceeds. Other witnesses corroborated Lorena's stories and claimed they had seen cuts and bruises on her. John's friends came forward to testify that John told them how he controlled her, forcefully had sex with her, and dominated her. The prosecution and the defense attorneys agreed that John definitely had a history of abusing his wife, and the repeated acts built up to the assault over time. The expert witnesses from both ends concluded that Lorena had been constantly battered and abused, and by 1993, she lived in fear of John. Before Lorena's trial, John was on trial from the 8th to the 10th of November 1993. On the 11th of November 1993, a jury of 9 women and 3 men found him not guilty of marital assault. John Bobbitt gave different variations of what happened between midnight of June 22nd and the early morning of June 23, 1993. In one account, he said they had not had sex, and even though Lorena had initiated sex, he was too tired to engage in it. In another account, he claimed that they had had sex, but he had slept through the whole act. The sex was, however, consensual, not a rape. After 7 long hours of deliberation, the jury found Lorena to be the most credible. She was found not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. On the 24th of January 1994, Lorena was admitted into a psychiatric ward for 45 days. It was a 45-day evaluation period at the Central State Hospital in Petersburg. On March 1, 1994, she was released after being considered not a threat to herself or the society. In 1995, John and Lorena Bobbitt finalized their divorce. A series of events led to what happened between Lorena and John Bobbitt. Not taking them into account might seem like a biased way of reporting what went down. As he was the victim, John Bobbitt's severed penis gained all the attention and the sensation it could get. Not just that, due to what had happened, some feminists frowned on what Lorena had done as they feared it might have far-reaching consequences. But that would be a one-sided story. John was discharged from the Marines in 1991 and no longer had a steady paycheck. Ask anybody and they will agree that losing a credible and steady source of income might slow things down in any family. He had trouble finding or keeping a job. The role of the sole household provider soon fell on Lorena. At this time, Lorena worked as a nanny in the Virginia area and as a manicurist in a beauty salon. Lorena soon developed a close relationship with the woman who owned the salon, Jenna Basutti. In October 1991, Lorena started to embezzle Basutti's money. She stole about $7,000, and when Basutti realized the embezzlement, she ordered Lorena to repay the stolen money with interest. Lorena could keep her job at the salon but looked elsewhere for her newfound hobby of theft. She stole a few dresses from Nordstrom, and when she got caught, she was punished with community service. In the same year, Lorena had an abortion and they had different stories about what happened again. According to Lorena, she was excited to start a family, but John did not receive the news with the same enthusiasm Lorena exhibited. She adds that John did not think he could care for the baby and suggested leaving Lorena if she kept and had the child. The fear of raising a child alone led Lorena to the choice of an abortion, and she insisted that John was the reason she had it. John's story was different as he recounted that Lorena had agreed that the time was not right for the couple to have a baby. They both decided on the abortion together. After the incident, John remained broke. To generate money, he tried to form a band called the Severed Parts to pay his mounting legal and medical bills. The band was not a success and it failed to generate money. In September 1994, John appeared in an adult film, John Wayne Bobbitt Uncut. After the trial, John Bobbitt moved to Las Vegas where he met Ron Jeremy. In an interview he had with Vanity Fair, John opened up about the adult film. A porno seemed like the best way to show my penis worked, only it wasn't all the way healed yet. I realize now that that was the point. The movie had not yet premiered when charges were brought against John by his new girlfriend Christina Elliott. He was found guilty of misdemeanor and domestic battery charges. He served 12 days out of the 15-day sentence a judge handed him. John divorced Lorena in 1995, and in 1996, he took another role in an adult film. One would wonder what the endgame was and why his phallus needed to grace screens. He had a reason that was at least reasonable to him. Besides the financial part, John had said yes to an offer from Howard Stern to undergo a reconstructive plastic surgery which would see the penis further enlarged. The second porno was titled Frankenpenis and was released in 1996. In 1999, John had accumulated a lot of legal issues for himself, ranging from assault to battery. He pleaded guilty to a charge of felony with attempted grand larceny after stealing $140,000 worth of clothing in Nevada. In the same year, a court found him guilty of harassing an ex-girlfriend named Desiree A. Luz. In 2002, he was charged afresh with battering his third wife, Joanna Farrell. He was found not guilty and was acquitted. Lorena resorted to keeping a low profile after the trial. To achieve that, she reverted to the use of her maiden name, Gallo. In October 1996, she visited Ecuador, the place of her birth, and had an official dinner with the current president, Abdallah Bucaram. The unlikely couple then baptized a child together as a godfather and a godmother. Their relationship sparked controversy in the media. The president was even criticized for having dinner with Lorena. In 1997, Lorena was in the news again after she was charged with assault against her mother. Reports had it that she punched the woman, Elvia Gallo, while they watched television. Lorena was soon acquitted of the charge and her mother remained with her. Lorena Gallo returned to the community college and found Dave Bellinger. The two became lovers in the late 90s and have since been together. Though they are unmarried, they have one daughter named Olivier together. Their decision to stay unmarried is speculated to be fear for marriages on Lorena's part as her first marriage had not worked. In 2007, Lorena Gallo started a foundation aimed at helping women who were in abusive relationships. Her foundation was called Lorena's Red Wagon Foundation, a non-profit organization that helps survivors of domestic abuse. Lorena and John were never seen together in public, at least not until 2009 when they made their first and only joint television appearance. All through their trial, before, during, and after, the couple took interviews but separately, never together. That changed in 2009 when The Insider brought them together. In the interview, Lorena told John, "You drove me crazy. You drove me insane. No woman should go through what I went through." In 2019, a docuseries titled Lorena premiered on Amazon and reignited conversations around the incident involving Lorena Bobbitt, her claims of domestic abuse and marital rape. Back in the 1990s, the Bobbitts were the talk of the time and the opening line for every comedian in the country. It definitely would have a different reaction today. In an interview with Olivia B. Waxman, Lorena Gallo opens up about how she felt about her case in the media reports. She said, "It was sad because they were more concerned about ratings than anything. They were more concerned about his penis instead of domestic violence. They missed the whole concept of domestic violence and abuse against women by a mile. She continued, "This is a very important issue that's going on, and you're more concerned about the man who lost his penis. The whole country was divided into women and men. Unfortunately, we're still in a patriarchal society. It's a man's world that hasn't changed much." She further lamented how the new generation knew nothing about the story and how it went down. She disclosed that there was a history that preceded what happened. She further spoke on how she guided the detectives and police officers to where she had dumped her former husband's member. According to her, her help in finding her ex-husband's member depicted that she was not vindictive and that the incident was not out of spite. She declared that if she had done it with bad intentions, she would have replied to them with unconcern. Aside from the TV show where they had met in 2009, very little is said by John Wayne Bobbitt about the incident. He admits he still harbors feelings towards Lorena, but they hardly see each other. "I loved the woman she was," John said in an interview. With all indications, he had moved on from the incident, and even though the incident had made him famous and featured in 2 adult films, it seemed there was no staying out of trouble for John Bobbitt. While his former partner now has a foundation for women who are survivors of domestic abuse, Bobbitt, as of 2019, was reported as living in North Las Vegas and searching for treasures hidden in the Rockies by Forrest Fenn, according to Vanity Fair. In the August 2018 issue of Vanity Fair, John stated he was paying his bills from the settlement he received from a car crash he suffered in 2014. He also told the magazine that he had a penile reduction surgery in 2016 in a bid to reverse the cosmetic work he had undergone in earlier years. John still maintains his innocence. According to what the New York Times reported, he said, "Gallo was never abused. She was the abuser, and she cut off my penis because I was going to leave her." The story of Lorena and John Bobbitt happened at a time when patriarchy was still rife and marital rape was just starting to have laws against it in the 50 states of the United States. Lorena was inspired by her own story and the incident, yet she feels sad about the big picture which the sensationalist media of the time ensured people missed. In a way, John's genitals gained more popularity than the underlying condition that caused it to start with, which was domestic violence and abuse. From t-shirts to commercials, the term Bobbitize was everywhere. Today, her story may have taken a different turn. The media and general public would have addressed Lorena's part more than it was in 1994. There is no doubt that the system that empowers men because they have phallus is what Lorena Gallo wants to stop with her foundation, as she thinks women deserve to be heard and helped. Amy Chozick, in her interview with Lorena Gallo, described her as being straightforward and open. "I know I'm still Lorena Bobbitt. That name, it's significant here," Lorena says as Heather Sten of the New York Times reports. As Lorena drove Amy around in the neighborhood where it all happened, she admired what she had done for herself and how far she had come. She was quoted by Heather Sten saying, "I'll put myself through the jokes and everything as long as I can shine a light on domestic violence and sexual assault and marital rape." She had no time to regret what she had done, the cutting off of her husband's penis. Amy asked her if she had regretted doing that, and her response was, "How can you regret something you didn't mean to do?" Today, a woman like Lorena would have been celebrated for standing up for herself and being a voice for the voiceless. Regardless, in her gentle way, the way she inspires is as graceful. And her war, albeit unintentional, against domestic violence was one she subdued. Story 4. Shannon Ruchak first met her future husband, Christopher Watts, in 2012. They were natives of North Carolina, with Shannon hailing from Aberdeen and Chris from Spring Lake. On November 3, 2012, they exchanged vows and officially became husband and wife. Not everyone was happy to see Shannon and Chris get married. Chris' parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, did not attend the wedding. Cindy later said she did not go because she and Shannon did not get along. She did not like the way Shannon treated her son. 1 year after their nuptials, Shannon and Chris made a significant life decision when they decided to purchase a new home together in the picturesque town of Frederick, Colorado. This move marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, as they embarked on a journey as husband and wife in their new home. After relocating to Colorado, Shannon and Chris Watts eagerly anticipated starting their family. On December 17, 2013, their dream became a reality with the birth of their daughter, Bella Marie. 2 years later, on July 17, 2015, the couple welcomed their second daughter, Celeste Catherine, lovingly referred to as Cece. Shannon was diagnosed with lupus at a young age. Lupus is a chronic autoimmune disease that affects various parts of the body. It's caused by the immune system mistakenly attacking healthy cells and tissues. In lupus, the immune system produces autoantibodies that target and destroy healthy cells by mistake, leading to inflammation and tissue damage. This diagnosis came with the unfortunate news that it could be challenging for her to conceive and have children. The news devastated Shannon, as she had always dreamt of becoming a mother. However, against all odds, Shannon experienced the incredible joy of becoming a mother not once, but twice. Everyone who knew Shannon described her as a ball of love and compassion. She seemed too good to be true, radiating kindness and positivity. Shannon possessed a strong drive and was determined to create the best life for herself and her family. Her vibrant personality and warm nature effortlessly captivated those around her. Every morning, Shannon would reach out to her friends with a heartfelt text message that read, "Good morning, beautiful." This simple gesture always left them feeling cherished and uplifted. However, as great as Shannon was as a friend, she was an even better mother. Her love for her two daughters, Bella and Cece, was immeasurable. Shannon cherished nothing in the world more than being a mother. She was dedicated and committed to nurturing and supporting her children in every way possible. Bella, Shannon and Chris's oldest daughter, was a nurturing little girl who loved taking care of her younger sister, Cece. From a little sister, Cece, on the other hand, was known for her energetic and vibrant personality. Described as a firecracker, Cece effortlessly brought joy and laughter into everyone's lives. Social media played a significant role in Shannon's life. She utilized these platforms to share videos about her life and showcase her vibrant personality. Her friends and family enjoyed watching these videos, which provided a glimpse into her daily life and the lives of her daughters. In many of her videos, Shannon expressed her admiration for her husband, Chris. She once posted a video in which she stated, "Chris is the best thing that has ever happened to her." This declaration of love painted a picture of Chris as a devoted husband and caring father. While Shannon's friends and family admired her happy marriage, they also noticed that Chris kept to himself. They found it difficult to connect with him on a deeper level. Despite this, they all accepted Chris's presence, knowing that Shannon was completely head over heels in love with him. In June 2015, Shannon and Chris filed for bankruptcy. The couple faced significant financial challenges, including a large mortgage payment, car payments, loans, and medical bills. Additionally, they had accumulated a substantial amount of credit card debt. At the time of the bankruptcy filing, Chris was employed at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shannon was employed at a children's hospital call center. By 2016, Shannon had embarked on a new career as a consultant for an MLM company, Lavelle. Her role involved selling a nutritional supplement called Thrive, which was delivered through a patch. Shannon's enthusiasm for her job was evident. Cynthia DeRosette, a co-worker, said every person that connected with her felt her light. Although Shannon was content with her life with her husband and two daughters, she yearned for one more pregnancy. Her heart longed for a baby boy to complete their family. In spring 2018, Shannon received an unexpected yet delightful surprise when she discovered she was pregnant for the third time. The news filled her with excitement and anticipation. Wanting to capture her husband's reaction, Shannon devised a plan. She decided to surprise Chris by telling him the exciting news on May 28th. As she awaited his arrival, Shannon dressed in a shirt that displayed the words, "Whoops, we did it again," a humorous play on Britney Spears' hit song, "Oops, I Did It Again." In the video, Chris can be seen entering the room, completely oblivious to the surprise awaiting him. He appeared shocked and caught off guard, and not necessarily happy. After further testing, Shannon discovered she was having a baby boy. Shannon and Chris were overwhelmed with joy. They decided to name their little bundle of joy, Nico. When Bella and Cece, Shannon's daughters, heard the news that they were going to be big sisters, they were so excited. During the summer of 2018, pregnant with Nico, Shannon traveled to North Carolina to spend time with her family. Chris, on the other hand, stayed behind in Colorado for work. While in North Carolina, Shannon decided to take her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie. Despite not getting along with her in-laws, Shannon agreed to proceed with the trip for the sake of her daughters. On the day of the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece, even though Shannon had told Cindy that Cece suffered from a nut allergy. However, despite this knowledge, Cindy served her granddaughter a snack that contained peanuts. This incident deeply troubled Shannon, as she felt that Cindy had put Cece's life at risk. In a text message to Chris, Shannon expressed her frustration and disappointment. She wrote, "You should call your dad and tell him you did not appreciate your mom putting your daughter at risk today. She's evil and willing to risk your daughter's life just to get under my skin. You and your dad are no different if you are okay with her behavior. There's nothing wrong with me and I'm not crazy. I just love my kids way too much." While Shannon was in North Carolina visiting family, she observed that Chris's communication with her had shifted strangely. Chris stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving Shannon puzzled. When she inquired about the matter, Chris shared that he had taken on additional responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees. However, he insisted that the situation was not cause for concern. On July 31st, Chris flew from Colorado to North Carolina to spend the week with Shannon and their two daughters, Bella and Cece. The entire family was eagerly anticipating his arrival. As Chris stepped off the airplane, Bella and Cece rushed toward him, their excitement palpable. Chris scooped them up in his arms and embraced them tightly. However, his interaction with Shannon was noticeably different. Instead of greeting her with a kiss, he nodded in acknowledgement. Taken aback by Chris's behavior, Shannon felt deeply hurt. Unable to contain her emotions, she texted one of her friends, expressing her growing concern. Shannon confided that she felt as if Chris had somehow changed, and she barely recognized the person she had married. Her words were filled with a mixture of sadness and confusion. Shannon texted her friend, stating that Chris, her husband, refused to talk to her even though they were physically present in the same room. Instead of engaging in direct conversation, Shannon and Chris exchanged messages through their phones. She even shared a picture with her friend depicting her and Chris sitting on separate couches facing in opposite directions. In these text messages, Shannon expressed her concern that Chris might be seeing another woman, which shocked her friend. The friend adamantly denied this possibility. They reassured Shannon that Chris loved her too much to engage in such behavior. Shannon sent a text message to one friend and poured out her heart. She revealed that Chris had confessed to her that he no longer believed they were compatible. This revelation came as a shock to Shannon, who had always felt that their love was strong. To make matters worse, Chris had told Shannon that he had hoped that getting her pregnant would somehow change his feelings. However, this did not prove to be the case, and Shannon was heartbroken to hear this. She had always cherished their relationship and believed their love could withstand challenges. Determined to save her family, Shannon suggested to Chris that they attend couples counseling. She knew their relationship was in trouble and believed professional guidance could help them navigate their difficulties. However, Chris flatly refused. Shannon was willing to make compromises and do whatever it took to save their relationship. However, she quickly realized that Chris was unwilling to reciprocate. Despite her best efforts, Shannon realized that there was simply nothing Chris wanted or was willing to compromise on. After returning home to Colorado from a trip to North Carolina, Shannon, Chris, and their daughters settled back into their usual routine. However, Shannon's stay was not prolonged, as she soon found herself embarking on another journey to Arizona for a business trip. During her stay in Arizona, Shannon's friends noticed a shift in her demeanor. Instead of her usual cheerful disposition, she seemed confused and distressed. One evening, while staying in their hotel room, Shannon divulged her concerns to her friends. She revealed that Chris had expressed his doubts regarding their compatibility and refused to consider going to couples counseling. On August 11th, as Shannon was with her friends in Arizona, a notification appeared on her phone, indicating a charge for a restaurant that had been made on her and Chris' account. While this in itself was not unusual, the amount charged raised concern. Shannon couldn't help but wonder why the bill was so high. She couldn't help but suspect Chris might be having dinner with another woman. This suspicion left her with a lingering feeling of unease and doubt. Around 1:48 a.m., Shannon returned home from her business trip. Shannon's close friend, Nicole Atkinson, drove her home. Footage from Shannon and Chris' doorbell camera showed Shannon entering her house. On August 13th, Shannon's friends woke up concerned about her because they hadn't received her usual good morning messages. They knew that she had an important appointment at the OBGYN scheduled for 9:30 a.m., and they knew that Shannon would never miss that. However, when Shannon missed a business meeting at 12:30 p.m., Nicole Atkinson, one of her closest friends, became very concerned. Nicole knew something was wrong when no one had heard anything from Shannon all day. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. Feeling a sense of urgency, Nicole made the decision to drive to Shannon's house. As she approached her house, her stomach sank. Shannon's van was parked in the garage, and the shoes she wore every day were by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door of Shannon's house, hoping she would come out and explain that she had overslept and was tired from her flight the previous day. However, Shannon never responded. One of Shannon's friends contacted her husband, Chris, to inform him that they were unable to get in touch with her. Chris assured them not to worry, as he believed that Shannon might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. His response puzzled Shannon's friends, as they were all in contact with one another, and none of them knew her whereabouts. Shannon did not have any plans to meet with any of them. Eventually, Shannon's friends informed Chris that they were planning to notify the Frederick Police Department and report Shannon and the girls as missing. Although Chris stated he did not want to get the police involved, Nicole, worried about her friend, called 911 to report Shannon, Bella, and Cece missing. After Nicole called the police, an officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at Shannon and Chris's house. From the officer's body cam footage, it was clear that Nicole was deeply distressed over her missing friend. As Nicole was explaining everything she knew about Shannon and her daughters, Chris pulled up to the house. Chris got out of his car and approached the officer, but it was clear he did not share the same level of concern as Nicole, even though his wife and daughters were missing. While searching Shannon and Chris's house, the officer stumbled upon Shannon's purse. Within this purse, the officer discovered Shannon's medication for her and her two daughters. The discovery of Shannon's purse further worried her friend Nicole, but Chris, Shannon's husband, remained calm as a cucumber. Additionally, the officer found Shannon's wedding pant on the bedside table. The officer and Chris walked to a neighbor of Shannon's and Chris to review footage from their security camera. This camera was positioned in such a way that it captured part of Shannon and Chris's driveway and garage. In the footage, Chris is seen opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the home at 5:28 a.m. As they watched the footage on the TV screen, Chris's demeanor began to change. He started to appear nervous and fidgety, as if he didn't enjoy whatever he was seeing on the screen. Even Chris's neighbor picked up on his strange behavior. When Chris left the house, the neighbor leaned into the officer and expressed doubts about Chris's behavior. The neighbor mentioned that he didn't think that Chris was acting right. Shannon's friends were concerned about her well-being and wanted to initiate a search for Bella and Cece as soon as possible. However, Chris had a different opinion, discouraging them from joining the search. His response worried Shannon's friends, as they could not comprehend his lack of worry for his wife and daughters. Officers canvassed Shannon and Chris's neighborhood, going door to door to ask if anyone had seen Shannon or anything unusual. By the following day, the FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search for Shannon, Bella, and Cece. The Boulder Police Department also provided cadaver dogs, which handlers used to search the property and inside the house. As the officers searched the inside of the home, one handler remarked that they smelled cleaning solutions and thought the house looked too clean. This comment raised suspicions and caused the officers to take a closer look at the cleanliness of the home. The presence of cleaning solutions suggested that someone had taken steps to conceal evidence or clean up any potential clues. During the process of searching Chris's house, he gave an interview to 2 Denver stations outside his residence. In this interview, Chris claimed that he and Shannon did not argue before her leaving. However, he mentioned that they had an emotional conversation. He said he wanted his family back and pleaded with whoever held Shannon, Bella, and Celeste to return them home. Chris emphasized his desire to see everyone again and that his house is not complete without his family. However, during the interview, Chris's behavior raised some eyebrows. He appeared cold and unemotional, which puzzled those who knew him. Shannon's friends who were watching the interview felt disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor. They believed his behavior was strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coder interviewed Chris. During the interview, Chris expressed his belief that Shannon might have taken the girls and gone to a friend's house to decompress. Throughout the interview, tips began pouring into the police station regarding potential sightings of Shannon and the girls. The police department received various pictures, and Chris was asked to identify any of the individuals as his missing wife and daughters. However, Chris was unable to provide any identification. Agent Coder asked Chris about his and Shannon's marriage during the interview. Chris responded by stating that he had never cheated on Shannon, and as far as he knew, Shannon had never cheated on him either. He said that he and Shannon were the type of people who would confide in one another if they ever felt like straying. During the interview, Agent Coder noticed a peculiar behavior from Chris. He observed that Chris made frequent hand movements towards his neck, which caught his attention. Agent Coder's suspicions grew, leading him to believe that the movements may hint at something deeper. At one point during the interview, Agent Coder excused himself briefly and informed the other officers working on the case that he thought Chris might have strangled Shannon. As more time passed with Shannon and her daughters missing, the feelings of worry and despair intensified among the loved ones who knew her. Despite their doubts that Shannon was safe, they desperately clung to the hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive somewhere. The absence of any updates or information from the authorities only heightened their anxiety and despair. Chris was released from the police department after a 3-hour interrogation. However, the police made arrangements for him to return on the following day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Chris agreed to fulfill this request. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and drove to the Frederick Police Department. Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation conducted Chris's polygraph test. During the polygraph, Chris denied knowing where Shannon was and claimed to have not caused her disappearance. Chris would have needed a score of about -4 to pass this polygraph test. Chris scored a dismal -18 on the polygraph. This outcome left the detectives convinced that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. However, they still needed to persuade him to admit it. The special agent, a highly skilled coder and polygrapher, Tammy Lee, confronted Chris regarding his failed polygraph results. He admitted that he did not physically harm Shannon but acknowledged that he caused her emotional pain. Furthermore, he confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. Chris expressed regret for his infidelity and stated that he had never anticipated engaging in such behavior. However, he denied any involvement in causing his family's disappearance. A little while into the interview, Chris requested the presence of his father, Ronnie. The officers were initially skeptical, fearing that allowing Ronnie into the interview room could lead to Chris seeking legal representation. However, they took a risk and allowed it anyway, hoping that his presence could get Chris to confess. In the interrogation room, Chris met with his father and admitted to murdering Shannon. However, he claimed that he did it only because she had hurt their daughters, Bella and Cece. Upon hearing this excuse, Shannon's friends knew he was lying. They knew that Shannon would never harm her daughters, as she loved them deeply and was looking forward to giving birth to her first son, Nico. Chris admitted to burying Shannon in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also said that he had disposed of the bodies of his daughters in oil tanks. However, even after being arrested and taken into custody, he continued to deny that he ever hurt them. The detectives did not believe for a moment that Shannon had hurt her daughters. Eventually, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty as punishment. It was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At Chris's sentencing hearing, the judge made a bold statement regarding the heinous crime he had committed. Chris stated that this crime was by far the most inhumane and vicious one he had encountered out of the thousands of cases he had dealt with in his career. A few years later, Chris admitted to having murdered Shannon, his wife, in their bed. Chris stated that he had strangled her after she confronted him about an extramarital affair and threatened to take their daughters away. Then, Chris put her body in his truck and drove it along with his 2 daughters to his worksite. Once there, Chris claimed that he took the lives of his 2 young daughters one by one. This grim revelation revealed that one daughter had to witness the death of her sister before succumbing to the same fate. Story 5. Angela Craig was poisoned and declared brain dead on March 18, 2023. The culprit? Her own husband, James. The Craig family lived a seemingly average life. The couple had 6 kids, and the family did face financial trouble despite living in a $1 million home that was all paid off. But things took a much darker turn for them on March 6, 2023, and all of it started with a protein shake. Denver, one of the most highly populated cities in Colorado, is known for its suburbs. But who knew that it would be in these suburbs where the life of a seemingly normal and ordinary family would take a dark turn? March 18, 2023, marked the death of Angela Craig, a loving and caring mother of 6. Her sudden illness and all the symptoms she had experienced took the doctors by surprise. Soon after her death, James Craig, her husband, got caught up in a series of lies as the sinister plan he developed for Angela's murder was revealed. As the case progressed, Angela's family was taken aback as they were exposed to one horror after another in what they thought was normal life. Angela Craig was pronounced brain dead at 4:29 p.m. The reason for her death at the time remained unknown, given that she was perfectly healthy before suffering from the illness. Her condition got to a point where her organs began shutting down. Doctors at the time were mystified. How could the medical condition of some who were perfectly healthy and going on trips to see family members deteriorate to the point where it would cause their death? Aurora is an eastern suburb located just 25 minutes outside of Denver. The region is known for its outdoor activities, schools, and overall ambience. Within that town lived a family of 8, James and Angela Craig, and their 6 children named Tolliver, Mira, Belle, Violet, Nora, and Cleo. James and Angela got married in 1999. At the time, they were 20 and 21, madly in love, and wanted to start a family together. Both of them were originally from Dodge City, Kansas, and had moved to Denver, Colorado after James had finished dental school and teaching at UMKC in 2006. In Denver, James started practicing at Summerbrook Dental, and Angela would help out at the facility when needed. Summerbrook Dental soon became the best option in the region. Apart from dentistry, the Craigs were known to be active members of the LDS and Mormon Church. At the church, Angela took on many roles, including being a teacher, a choir director, a youth organization leader, and a family history consultant. Out of all these roles, her favorite was being a family history consultant, as it involved helping families figure out their history and perform temple ordinances on his behalf. All 6 of their children were raised and baptized in the church, and they participated in all the activities. Everything seems to be going pretty well in their lives, doesn't it? In 2019, James made around $800,000, and the family lived in a $1 million paid-off home. But wait till you hear this. The same year, he took a $675,000 and a $242,000 loan against his house. Despite his income, the family did face financial difficulties. He had taken out these loans to fix things, but the opposite happened. He ended up owing $315,000 to the IRS, had $200,000 in credit card debt, and over $750,000 in other types of debt, which included some bad investments in cryptocurrencies. The following year, his total debt amounted to $2.2 million, and he had to file for bankruptcy. In 2022, Summerbrook Dental began experiencing financial difficulties of its own, and wasn't keen on keeping him on board. He realized that he would have to file for bankruptcy again. However, it was at that time that his dental school friend Ryan stepped in. Ryan acquired Summerbrook Dental, and the two officially became business partners. Both Ryan and James and their families had always been best friends, But in 2022, James began to confide in Ryan more than ever before. On the morning of March 6, 2023, both James and Angela got up early to work out, and each had a protein shake. Later in the morning, James received a text message from Angela, who wasn't feeling well. In the text, she'd asked him if he had added extra vitamins to her protein shake as she was feeling dizzy. To this, James responded that he'd added in a full scoop of caffeine and 1 big scoop of B vitamins, and that he was feeling a bit shaky too. However, Angela told him that she only takes 1 small scoop of the B vitamins. As the two continued to talk, Angela told James that she felt as if she had been drugged. The response James sent to this message will make you think about whether the Craig family was actually living a normal life or not. His response to the text was, "Given our history, I know that must be triggering. Just for the record, I didn't drug you. I am super worried though. You looked really pale before I left. Like in your lips even. This is quite an unusual thing to say, but we'll get into it later on in the video." On March 6th, Angela was eventually admitted to the Parker Adventist Hospital as the symptoms were not going away. Despite numerous tests, medical professionals at the hospital could not identify the cause of her condition, and she was sent home the same day. On the morning of March 7th, James told Angela that he would take the day off from the dental clinic since she wasn't feeling well. Angela, however, aware of the family's financial situation, told James that he should go to work instead and that everything would be okay. Both of them continued to communicate via text throughout the entire day. She told him that it was probably just sickness and that she planned on reaching out to her primary care doctor. During the day, she also sent him a text that read, "I'm kind of wondering if maybe I had a sinus infection, and I didn't really even notice because I got so used to them and it turned into an inner ear infection, and that's why it felt like it came on all of a sudden." As the two of them continued to talk, Angela told James that earlier in the day she had passed out in the kitchen and that the only thing she remembered about the incident was their daughter Violet screaming. After hearing this, James told her that she should call 911, but she refused. At that time, James talked to a person named Matt and discussed Angie's condition with him. According to Matt, the symptoms she was experiencing lined up with diabetes. He recommended that Angie should call a new primary doctor, mentioning that she's a diabetic and that she needs to be seen sooner rather than later. However, Angie called her own doctor to make an appointment. She even texted James, telling him not to use those words and that he told Matt to stick it. Angela then scheduled an appointment for Friday, March 10th, but later moved to Thursday so that she could be seen earlier. Both of them spent the night of the 7th watching TV and snuggling, hoping for a better tomorrow. A day after passing out in the kitchen, Angela started to feel better on March 8th, but was still unaware of the devious plan her husband had set in motion. The improvements she experienced on March 8th were short-lived. The following day, she began to feel cold, tired, shaky, weak, and dizzy. On March 9th, a family friend brought over a glucometer to the house, and Angie was measuring in at 179. The readings, however, dropped to 140 later during the day. She later ended up being admitted to the hospital as her symptoms wouldn't subside. After hearing about this, James texted Angie, was he trying to joke around and lighten the mood to make Angie feel better? Or was this response pure sarcasm coming from the fact that his plan was working? We'll learn more about this as the story unfolds. During that day, both Angie and James continued to text about different things like church, the kids, and other family affairs. Over the next 5 days, doctors conducted several different tests to determine the cause of Angie's condition. Most of the issues she was experiencing appeared to be related to blood pressure and vomiting. During that time, family members and friends pitched in, helped out with the kids, brought meals, and were there for Angie when needed. James also begins to have frequent conversations with Ryan's wife, Michelle, who has a PhD in nursing and was also working as a professor. She was also trying to figure out the answer to what was happening to Angie. However, she was also unaware of the plan that James had initiated. On March 10th, James told Michelle that not having any answers was becoming pretty rough. He also mentioned that one of the main problems Angie was experiencing was her blood pressure, which at the time was 100/60, and prior to that was 56/44. He also mentioned that the doctors would keep her for one more night. During the conversation, He emphasized that his main concern was how Angie must be feeling. But given what we know about his plans, this was probably just an attempt to gain sympathy. Over the next few days, James had shown tremendous care towards Angie and the kids and did everything he had to get the family through the rough time. One of the times when he visited the hospital, he even told Angie that he was sorry for not bringing any flowers. However, all of this could have just been a part of his master plan, as it would have helped avoid suspicion when he'd actually succeeded with his motives. Angela would stay admitted at the hospital until March 14th. After doctors were unable to determine what caused her condition, she was sent home with an oxygen tank with instructions to use it full-time. When she got back home, she texted James jokingly and said that he'd married an old lady who was now in an oxygen tank. When Angie got back, the children and everyone else hoped this would be the end of the trauma. The Craig family still didn't have a diagnosis about what had happened, but Angie was doing better. She felt stable and wasn't vomiting. However, all of this turned out to be false hope, as her improvements were short-lived. On the morning of March 15th at around 11 a.m., Angie's brother rushed her to the University of Colorado Hospital's emergency room. At this point, everyone was desperate for answers, but no one was aware of the horrendous act James had committed to cause all of this. He arrived at the hospital soon after Angela had been admitted. She complained of a severe headache and dizziness. A few hours later, at around 2 p.m., Angela had a seizure and her condition began to decline. Doctors at the University of Colorado had failed to incubate her, and she was suffering from intracranial pressure, which essentially means that there was an issue with the blood flow to her brain. In addition, her pupils were also unresponsive. Given her condition, she was moved to the intensive care unit, ICU, and doctors stated that her condition was dire. As all of this was going on, James texted Michelle 2 pictures of Angie and told her that Angie's condition had gotten quite worse. Her blood pressure was 55/44, and SOP2 was 84. He also told her that the doctors had stated Angie should have been mentally responsive by then, but she wasn't. After hearing this, both Michelle and Ryan rushed to the hospital to offer support. But James, at that time, was unaware that this text would lead to him being exposed. On his way to the University of Colorado Hospital, Ryan got a call from the office manager at Summerbrook Dental, Jacqueline. She told Ryan that James had come back to the office on March 6th after hours. Ryan was informed that another employee, Caitlin, had seen James using a computer in exam room 9, and the lights were turned off. It seems like a regular office thing at first, right? But James had no reason to be using that computer, since he had one in his own office and used to frequently bring his own laptop to Summerbrook Dental. After leaving the office that day, James texted Caitlin that he would be receiving a personal package at the office and that she was not to open it. The package arrived at the office on March 13th and was opened by another employee who was unaware of it being a personal item. Inside was a foil square with a biohazard warning and a slip labeled potassium cyanide. The employee resealed the package and handed it over to James. When Caitlin heard about Angie's condition, she became suspicious and talked to Jacqueline. The reasons for suspicion? Well, you see, she had previously experienced symptoms of ingesting potassium cyanide, and her symptoms included nausea, low blood pressure, and vomiting. It was pretty much the same thing Angie had been experiencing ever since she took that protein shake. At the time, she recalled James telling her that Angie had accused him of poisoning her when she was sick, and that James had even said that there are poisons hospitals don't even test for. She also remembered that James had told Angie he wanted a divorce. It's worth mentioning here that both James and Angela were having relationship problems, most of which were because of James. He had been addicted to porn since his teenage years, had gambling issues, and was exposed to several affairs. Both Ryan and Michelle arrived at the hospital separately and talked to James for a short while. Ryan went over to one of the nurses and told her everything he had just learned from Jacqueline on the phone, including the fact that he suspected Angie had been poisoned by her husband. Afterward, both Ryan and Michelle stayed with James as he spoke to the doctors about Angie's prognosis and dealt with emotions of what they were telling him. Although both Ryan and Michelle had arrived at the hospital separately, they went to one of their cars together. While in the car, Ryan received a phone call from James. He wanted to know if Ryan had talked to anyone at the hospital. On the call, he admitted to sharing information about the package. James argued that the package contained a ring for Angela, but Ryan, who knew the truth, claimed that the package in fact did not contain a ring. James questioned his claims by saying that he couldn't have known what was in the package since it had never been opened. However, Ryan told him that the package had been opened and then asked him why he had ordered potassium cyanide. At this point, James came up with a new story. He told Ryan that he had ordered the potassium cyanide because Angie had asked him to since she didn't have the right credentials to place an order. However, he had never thought Angie would actually end up using it. Ryan, who had a pretty clear idea of what had happened, told James to stop talking and get a lawyer. The nurse that Ryan had talked to was a mandated reporter and had informed the police, which triggered an investigation. Police arrived at the hospital just after midnight on March 16th. By that time, Angela was in a coma, and doctors were not sure whether she'd make it through the night. After talking with the hospital staff, detectives learned that there had been no change in Angie's condition. These spoke to Ryan and Michelle, whose stories matched up. In addition, they also asked Caitlin to come to the Aurora police station and make a statement. Given that James and Angie had minor children, a CPS investigation was also triggered. During the investigation, the kids were given time to go and see Angie. However, she had made no progress by that time, so it was basically a time to say goodbye. The kids were initially allowed to say goodbye at 6:45 p.m. However, due to the ongoing investigation, they had to wait until 10 p.m. Angela was pronounced brain dead on March 18th at 4:29 p.m., and James was the one who opted to pull the plug. James was eager to not have an autopsy performed on Angela's body and wanted a cremation as soon as possible. The investigation, however, had begun before she was pronounced brain dead. The investigation revealed that Angela had 3 different substances in her blood: potassium cyanide, arsenic, and tetrahydrolazine. Given this, her death was declared a homicide, and James Craig was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The police investigation started on March 16th. They were able to get search warrants for his home, dental office, and devices. Some of the items seized from his residence included a computer tablet, a water bottle on an exercise bike, multiple types of powdered protein, and 2 unlabeled plastic bags containing a white powdery substance. The police interviewed James and his children individually, and a Child Protective Services, CPS, worker contacted them as well. The worker stated that James had told them that Angela had considered suicide and that he had revived her after several suicide attempts. James also mentioned he asked Angela for a divorce in December 2022, and her depression got worse after. The caseworker was compelled to report James mentioning Angela overdosing on opioids, and that her toxicology reports would have something unusual in them. The children, however, didn't report anything similar. The oldest one was aged 20, and it's very unlikely that Angela's depression and suicide attempts would have gone unnoticed. In addition, James never sought any medical or psychiatric help for Angie. One of the messages retrieved from his device was sent to Ryan. In the message, James mentioned that he was unhappy that Ryan got the authorities involved, and that if he really cared for him, he would not speak to the police unless forced to do so. The message read, "I understand why you did what you did. I do. I get it. But if you had come to me personally, man to man, instead of talking to everyone else about what you thought you knew, I might have let you in on some details that would have made you less likely to cause this horrible storm. If you had only put me higher on your list of priorities, instead of putting everyone else's opinions and gossip ahead of me. For that, I am very, very mad at you." The police had also retrieved text message conversations between the couple. In those conversations, James had asked Angela not to talk to her sister about what the couple was experiencing. This conversation happened on March 1st when Angie was visiting Utah. After contacting Angie's sister, Tony, police uncovered that James had drugged Angela 5 or 6 years ago. He claimed that the reason for this was to keep Angela from stopping him as he gave himself a fatal injection. However, no evidence of James committing suicide was found. The police later talked to the office manager at Summerbrook Dental, who told them the entire story about Exam Room 9 and the personal package. The police examined the search history and hard drive of the computer in Exam Room 9. In it, they found a Gmail account belonging to James and different search queries such as, how many grams of pure arsenic will kill a human? Is arsenic detectable in autopsy? Undetectable poisons that show no signs of foul play. The police also found that the same Gmail account was used to order arsenic metal from Amazon. The same account was also used to order Sigma 2078110-25G, aka potassium cyanide. In addition, police also discovered personal communication records between James and another woman. Both of them had started dating and conversed about going through a lengthy divorce. The woman also took 2 flights to Colorado. The woman was an orthodontist who had met James at a conference where he had told her that he was already living separately from his wife. Since Angela's murder, she has cooperated with the police investigations. She mentioned that their relationship wasn't serious. She had mentioned that both of them hadn't started talking about a future together, and that she wouldn't have dated him had she known he was still married and living with his wife. This woman told the police all of this to explain that she could not have been the motive behind Angela's murder. Experts believe that the protein shakes Angie had consumed were poisoned and that she was given minor doses prior to receiving a fatal one. As of now, James has not entered a plea. He has been assigned a public defender and his trial is scheduled to begin on August 8, 2024. The motive behind the murder? James is $2.2 million in debt, and Angela has 3 life insurance policies, with James being the beneficiary of each. Could it be money? An affair? We'll have to wait for the trial to find out for sure. Story 6. Katrina Ashley Edlund was born on July 16, 1982. She was the youngest child of her mother, Vicky. Katrina had 2 siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda. As a child, Miranda looked up to her older sister, Katrina. Miranda often tried on Katrina's clothes and used her makeup as she admired and wanted to be just like her. Over the years, Miranda and Katrina developed a deep bond and became more like best friends than sisters. When Katrina was young, her parents separated and she lived with her mother. Katrina was raised in Machesney Park, Illinois, a bedroom community located outside of the city. Those who knew Katrina described her as a kind-hearted and fun-loving individual. Katrina particularly cherished the holiday season and thoroughly enjoyed giving gag gifts to her friends and family. Overall, Katrina was very happy and deeply involved in her church. She had a strong desire to help others and was more than willing to offer her time to anyone in need. Even though Katrina was happy, she still yearned to find love and believed she had met her Prince Charming when she encountered Todd Smith at a bar at age 20. Todd, a successful financial planner who owned his own business and worked out of his home, had 3 daughters. Despite their differences, the couple hit it off and Todd's work flexibility allowed them to travel extensively. 3 years into their relationship, Todd proposed to Katrina, which she happily accepted. The couple planned an intimate ceremony in a local park and Katrina was ecstatic about their future together. She loved her stepdaughters and was eager to build a bright future with Todd. Moreover, Katrina's mother, Vicky, and her siblings, Chad and Miranda, loved Todd and considered him a great guy. They trusted him to take care of Katrina and believed the duo was a perfect match. Following their marriage, Katrina and Todd settled in McChesney Park, where they began their life together. On October 20, 2012, Katrina Smith, a 30-year-old woman, called her mother, Vicky, and told her she was house-sitting for a friend. During their conversation, Katrina mentioned that she would be coming over for dinner on October 24th and had news to share with her mother. Vicky sensed something was going on, but she wasn't sure what it could be. Before hanging up the phone, Vicky promised to cook Katrina's favorite dish, chicken and dumplings. However, she would never have the opportunity to fulfill that promise. Several days after that phone call, Katrina disappeared, and Vicky would never see her again. At 5 p.m. on October 23rd, Todd Smith contacted 911 to report the disappearance of his wife, Katrina Smith. Todd informed the dispatcher that Katrina was house-sitting for a friend, and he had been unable to reach her for several hours. He stated that the house was empty when he drove to where she was staying. Miranda and Chad, Katrina's sister and brother, became concerned when they learned of her disappearance. Chad, who was training with the U.S. Army in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to assist in the search for his sister. On the night of the 23rd, a resident called the police to report an abandoned vehicle near Rock River. According to the resident, the car was not parked on the roadside, but was in an easement, as if it had been abandoned in a hurry. When police arrived to investigate the vehicle, they ran the license plate and discovered it belonged to Katrina Smith. Upon examining the car, the police officer found no sign of a struggle or Katrina. When Katrina's mother, Vicky, heard the news that her daughter's car had been found abandoned in a ditch on the side of the road in an unfamiliar area, she knew that something bad had happened to her daughter. It was the only plausible explanation that made sense to Vicky. If Katrina's car was in that area, someone had taken her and parked the car there. After Katrina's car was found, her case was officially classified as a missing person, and the search for her intensified. At 11 p.m. on October 12th, the police took Todd Smith to the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department for a formal interview. During the interview, Todd disclosed to the detective that he had last seen his wife, Katrina, on October 22nd. Todd claimed Katrina returned home for a short while to do laundry, because she had a big job interview the following day. As the laundry was going, Todd explained to the detective that Katrina left to go to the mall to buy something and returned home at 8:30 p.m. However, Todd mentioned that Katrina quickly left the house again to go out for a final time. Todd stated that Katrina had informed him she had one last stop to make before returning to the house. She was house-sitting for a friend. The day after Katrina was classified as a missing person, Todd Smith took to the media to plead for his wife's safe return. In a heart-wrenching and emotional appeal, Todd broke down in tears as he expressed his desperate desire to find his wife, Katrina. He appealed to the public, asking anyone who knew anything about Katrina's whereabouts to come forward and share information. As the hours passed, the search for Katrina intensified, and search crews, consisting of officers and volunteers, dedicated their time and effort to locate the missing woman. Their efforts focused specifically on a park located near the spot where Katrina's car had been abandoned. The investigators hoped that any evidence or clues regarding her disappearance could be found in the vicinity. When Chad, Katrina's brother, arrived in Illinois from his army training in Oklahoma, everyone met him at the park to search for Katrina. Chad, using his military training, took control of the search party. He charted and plotted on a map and divided the volunteers who had come to look for Katrina into teams. Chad got people out looking, ensuring that a thorough search was conducted. As the officers searched the park, they used dogs and stood side by side, walking in a straight line. This tactic was used to cover as much ground as possible and ensure that they did not miss any items of evidence, no matter how small. The officers took every precaution to ensure they did not overlook anything in their quest to find Katrina. Katrina's mother, Vicky, hung up missing person flyers for Katrina all around town. She left these flyers at gas stations, convenience stores, and lampposts. Vicky's main objective was to spread awareness and ensure that as many people as possible were informed about Katrina's disappearance. However, due to her overwhelming grief and fear of finding her daughter's body, Vicky was unable to participate in the search. Throughout this difficult time, Todd, Katrina's husband, remained emotional. Chad encouraged Todd to stay strong, reminding him that they needed to remain focused on finding Katrina. He stood by Todd's side the entire time, feeling awful for his grieving brother-in-law. An officer discovered Katrina's purse where her car was found. As he continued down the road from where her car was found, he found additional items that belonged to her. Among these were her cell phone and towels that appeared to be used to clean blood. It became clear that someone had been disposing of Katrina's belongings as they moved away from her abandoned vehicle. Unfortunately, the police had no clue about where Katrina was at that point. However, they suspected something bad had happened to her. The items found on the side of the road were taken to the crime lab for testing, and the police eagerly awaited the results of their investigation. In the meantime, the police began delving into Katrina's personal life, in search of any clues that could explain her disappearance. As the officers delved into the investigation of Katrina's disappearance, They aimed to gain a comprehensive understanding of every facet of her life. This digging involved examining whether Katrina had any relationships outside of her marriage, investigating any potential involvement in gambling or drug activities, and meticulously documenting her daily routines. The officers interviewed Katrina's friends and family extensively to gather this crucial information. These individuals unanimously described Katrina as a kind-hearted, responsible individual who consistently prioritized her responsibilities and avoided engaging in any questionable activities. Katrina's loved ones expressed that she was known for her dedication to her work and for maintaining a strong work ethic. According to their testimonies, she never exhibited any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. In fact, they described her as a dedicated spouse and a hardworking woman who never compromised her integrity. During the search for Katrina, a woman provided an intriguing tip. According to this woman, she had witnessed a blue vehicle matching the description of Katrina's car, stopped on a bridge over Rock River on the night of her disappearance. The trunk of the car was open and she could see a person kneeling behind it. However, the woman was unable to provide any specific details, such as the person's gender or race. When the woman came forward and reported this incident to the police, the officers began to consider the possibility that Katrina may have ended up in the river through foul play. However, they still lacked concrete evidence to support this theory. Officers knew that they needed to investigate further to see if anyone had the motive to harm Katrina. Despite claims that Katrina and her husband, Todd, were happily married, Todd remained a subject of interest. The authorities had doubts, as there was always the possibility of hidden conflicts or secrets within the marriage. The investigation into Katrina's disappearance continued, and the police received information that led them to a suspect. They learned that there was a boy in town who exhibited an obsession with Katrina. This obsession went back to earlier in the year, when Katrina confided in her friends about a teenage boy from her church who exhibited an unhealthy obsession with her. It was alleged that the boy had been involved in acts of voyeurism, specifically targeting Katrina by spying on her through her bedroom window. Katrina grew increasingly nervous during this time due to the teenager's behavior. However, the peeping activities eventually ceased when the teenager moved away for college. The police became suspicious and wondered if the teenager had returned home at some point and resumed stalking Katrina. As a result, they dedicated significant resources to track him down. 3 days into the search for Katrina, her cell phone, which was examined at the crime lab, revealed crucial clues. The phone turned out to be a treasure trove of information for the investigating officers. By investigating Katrina's cell phone, they gained valuable insights into her text messages, incoming and outgoing calls, pictures, videos, and even her GPS location. Katrina's phone data provided the police with a wealth of knowledge, enabling them to piece together a clearer picture of Katrina's activities. For instance, they discovered that she was having an extramarital affair with a coworker named Guy Gabriel. The relationship between Katrina and Guy Gabriel began innocently enough. They initially met after work one night and hit it off. Their connection grew stronger and they became romantically involved. However, the detective's background check on Guy Gabriel revealed a darker side. Officers discovered that Guy Gabriel had a history of domestic violence. Moreover, the detectives stumbled upon text messages sent by Guy Gabriel to Katrina, demanding that she leave her husband Todd for him. Because of Guy Gabriel's history of violence and his messages to Katrina, he became the prime suspect in her disappearance. The police thought it was possible Guy Gabriel got mad at Katrina for not leaving her husband for him and reacted violently. When Katrina's family found out that she had been having an affair on Todd, they were completely taken aback. Everyone had long believed Katrina and Todd were the epitome of an ideal and happy couple. To discover that Katrina had engaged in such betrayal left everyone in shock and disbelief. Todd, who had no idea about his wife's affair until the police investigation revealed it, was shattered. The news that his wife had been unfaithful hit him hard. Guy Gabriel met the police investigating Katrina's disappearance at the police department for a formal interview. During the interview, Guy appeared nervous, although he did admit to having an affair with Katrina. However, Guy denied having any involvement in Katrina's disappearance. According to Guy, he was at work the night Katrina went missing. While the police investigated Katrina's affair with her coworker, Guy Gabriel, they learned about an incident that occurred 2 weeks before Katrina went missing. Witnesses told the police that it was lunchtime at the auto shop where Katrina and Guy worked, and as all the workers stood outside chatting, a black Volkswagen Jetta sped through the parking lot. The masked driver threw a stack of flyers through the car's open sunroof. These papers fell from the sky and landed at everyone's feet as the employees gathered outside. As the car sped away, the workers picked up the documents and said they were flyers with a derogatory statement about Katrina and Guy Gabriel's relationship. However, no one knew who the driver of the VW Jetta was. When the police questioned Katrina's hairstylist, she revealed that Katrina had confided in her about feeling unsafe and expressing a desire to purchase a gun to protect herself. Katrina had expressed concerns that someone was following her and even went to a store to have her phone checked for a tracking device. At the police garage, crime scene investigators examined Katrina's car for evidence. One of the tools the investigators employed was luminol, a chemical compound that reacts with blood to produce a bright glow. The luminol revealed the presence of a significant amount of blood in the trunk of Katrina's car. The investigators turned their attention to the front seat of Katrina's car. Once again, they sprayed luminol to reveal more bloodstains, which further solidified their suspicions. Furthermore, upon examining the undercarriage of Katrina's car, the investigators discovered remnants of a GPS tracker. Through examination and analysis, it was confirmed that the blood found in the car was Katrina's. This confirmation, combined with the volume of blood found, led the police to an alarming conclusion. The amount of blood found convinced them that Katrina may no longer be alive. 18 days after Katrina went missing, the police department received a call from an off-duty fireman on Rock River. This fireman was fishing and saw something in the river that he thought a log had taken. However, when he drove his boat closer for a better look, he realized that the object was a body. The fire department was called in to recover the body, and upon pulling it from the water, they discovered that it was a female body. However, it was initially difficult to determine the identity of the body, as it had severely decomposed. They had no idea if it was Katrina Smith or not. The body was then transported to the medical examiner's office, where the staff performed an autopsy to determine the cause of death. In order to identify the remains, dental records were provided to a county dental expert. After examination, the expert matched the teeth from the body to those in Katrina Smith's records, and concluded that the body pulled from the river was indeed that of Katrina Smith. Katrina's cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. When Katrina's family learned her body had been found and she had been murdered by blunt force trauma to her head, they all broke down and cried. This news was devastating, and their emotions overwhelmed them as they processed the magnitude of what had happened. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was in disbelief when she heard the news. The knowledge that her daughter had been violently beaten in the head was unbearable for Vicky. Officers tracked down the teenage boy who had been allegedly stalking Katrina and cleared him as a suspect after they confirmed his alibi that he had been on campus at his college during the time of Katrina's disappearance and murder. This confirmation eliminated him as a viable suspect, and the police turned their attention to Katrina's boyfriend outside of her marriage, Guy Gabriel. Guy Gabriel told the police he had an alibi for the night Katrina disappeared. He stated that he had been at work during that time. To support his claim, Guy's managers provided their time card, which confirmed that Guy had been at work that night. Additionally, several co-workers corroborated Guy's alibi, stating that they had seen him at their workplace. With Guy Gabriel's alibi confirmed, the police were no longer suspicious of his involvement in Katrina's disappearance and murder. Although Guy Gabriel was no longer a suspect, the police sought his perspective on who may have hurt Katrina. Guy divulged that Katrina's husband, Todd, exhibited controlling behavior, which led him to encourage Katrina to leave her marriage. He believed that Todd's controlling nature could have escalated and led to physical harm. As police delved deeper into Katrina's marriage with Todd Smith, several concerning details emerged. Firstly, it was discovered that Katrina had expressed a desire to divorce Todd to several people. Furthermore, the police confirmed that Katrina had met with a divorce attorney the day prior to her disappearance. Despite Katrina's claim that she was house-sitting at a friend's condo, the officers discovered she had moved in because she and Todd had separated. After gathering information and conducting interviews, the police suspected Todd of being behind the mysterious flyer incident at Katrina's workplace. This suspicion grew stronger when officers discovered that Todd had test-driven a black VW Jetta, the same model and color as the car involved in the flyer incident. The timing of these events also raised suspicion, as Todd allegedly took the test drive around the same time the incident occurred. When the police informed Katrina's family that not only was Todd the prime suspect in her murder, but also that he was already in custody, they were completely shocked and in disbelief. They had loved and respected Todd, considering him more than just an in-law. The news left everyone feeling devastated. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was particularly affected. The realization that her daughter's husband could be responsible for her murder left her physically ill. It was unimaginable to her that Todd could have done something so atrocious. Vicky had always trusted and respected Todd, and the idea that he could be capable of such a heinous crime never crossed her mind. The police received information regarding Todd's financial situation, as it was revealed that his financial investment company was facing legal troubles. With Todd out of work, Katrina was the breadwinner for the family. Based on this information, officers formulated a theory that if Katrina were to leave Todd and his daughters, the money would go with her. This realization may have led Todd to consider murdering his wife as a means to gain access to those funds. In order to gather evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for Todd and Katrina's home. During the search, investigators stumbled upon a baseball in a corner of the garage. Upon closer examination, they noticed traces of blood on the bat. This discovery led them to believe that it could very well be the weapon that was used to kill Katrina. The injuries she had sustained were blunt force trauma, which was consistent with a bat being used. The investigators conducted a DNA test on the bat to confirm their suspicions. This analysis confirmed that Katrina's blood was on the bat, solidifying the link between the murder weapon and the victim. Additionally, the investigators stumbled upon a large area underneath the car that had been meticulously cleaned. Upon further examination, they discovered that the bloodstains found under the vehicle matched Katrina's DNA profile. 30 days after Katrina Smith was murdered, her husband, Todd Smith, was arrested and charged with her murder. His arrest came as a relief to her family. On January 11, 2017, Todd's trial began. The state presented its case to the jury, painting a vivid picture of the night Katrina was murdered. It was revealed that Katrina had recently met with a divorce attorney to discuss her marital problems. This meeting served as a starting point for the prosecution, as they argued that Katrina's decision to seek legal assistance indicated a troubled relationship. According to the state, Katrina had gone to Todd's house to do laundry in preparation for a job interview she had scheduled for the following morning. During her visit, the prosecution alleged that Katrina had made it clear to Todd that their marriage was truly over. This declaration, they argued, led to Todd reacting violently. The state alleged that while Katrina was in the garage, Todd, in a fit of rage, grabbed a baseball bat and mercilessly beat her to death. After ensuring Katrina's lifeless body, Todd allegedly proceeded to move her into the trunk of her car. He then drove to a remote location known as Rock River. There, he disposed of her body by throwing it off a nearby bridge. Following the disposal of Katrina's body, Todd abandoned her car on the side of the road. As he walked back home to wash away any evidence, he disposed of her cell phone and the bloody towels he had used to clean the garage. Jurors found Todd guilty and sentenced him to 55 years in prison. And the night deepens. Thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.